Welcome everybody to DNS Unfiltered Day. I'm here with JQ. How are you, my friend?
Thank you, Mikey. I'm doing super well today. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Yeah, and first of all,
Yeah,
could you pronounce your name? I did not want to butcher it terribly. Could you pronounce the name for the audience?
yeah, no, that's why. My name is Jiquan Ngiam. Really hard to pronounce. So I go by JQ usually.
And I'm
Yes,
going to call you JQ because we met in person and we're friends now.
yes, we did at RSA. Yeah, we went to your
Yeah, we
booth
met at
there too.
RSA. Yeah, so
Amazing.
JQ is the CEO of Mint MCP. You can check it out at mintmcp.com. He has a long history in the IT field, specifically around AI. And I'm hoping today we can really talk about this kind of AI sprawl that we see occurring and how to get a handle on it. Not like a sales pitch, so don't go anywhere, but JQ is really an expert in this field and has really helped me and DNS Filter kind of get a handle on how we want to go forward in this new AI world. So maybe we should start with a little backgrounder.
Yeah. Let me tell you about. I'm JQ Sichuan. I've been in the we're in Palo Alto Bay Area. So I've been in the Bay Area for 16 years now. And started my Bay Area at Stanford when I was doing my grad school PhD program with Andrew Ng, my advisor. He and I then went on to start a small ad tech startup you might have heard of called Coursera, where I helped to build out the founding team, all of it, build out the materials for the machine learning classes, the platform, all of that good stuff. Was there for many years. Then after that, I was at Google Brain, where I did applied research with Waymo. So you see lots of papers with me on that. And then around a few years ago, we all saw the AI revolution happen. And so for me, the interest has always been like, can these agents AI do more work for us? So since then, my team and I have been just exploring deep into that aspect. And right now, we're focused on helping enterprises like yourself, Mikey at DNS Filter, really get a handle on how do we think about these agents. They're starting to seem like they can do a lot of work, especially with Claude Code, Claude Cowork coming out, even for business non-technical users. And the limits seem to be, there's no limits in what they can do in some ways, but we're limited really by the data they can access. Right, the more data they can access, the more data they can read, write to, they can get more done. But now there's a lot of concerns in there, like what data should I get access to, all of that. And so we really focus on that problem and help companies navigate that.
So Stanford, Coursera, Google Brain, Waymo, now Mint MCP. I think Lutra was in there. You're a founder of that.
Lutra was that too.
So yeah, maybe you in the audience have heard of some of those. So JQ knows what he's talking about. And he's been around this AI space specifically for a while. I'm curious, out of all those experience you've had, what is there like a through line that you've kind of seen emerge in your experience?
Oh boy, I think it's the one thing that I've seen emerge is compute is like the key. So when I started my PhD program in 2009, me and Andrew and my team were like, we're trying to make the models produce and understand images. And it was so primitive, like they put in Gabor filters. And over time, the recipe that we saw was the more data and compute you throw at these AI models, the more they learn. And if you keep scaling that up by making them, multiples times bigger, they get better and better and better. And so one thing that we just seen is, the data and compute just drives us really far. And it's just really exciting because we went from models that were like, somewhat producing right sounding text all the way now to models that seem to be able to reason, decide what to do, run for hours. And I think the trend is going to keep holding, where we're going to see these things get even more intelligent as we scale it up. I don't think we have hit the limits of that yet, surprisingly. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you were thinking of this specifically, but I know you wrote a paper on multimodal deep learning.
Yes.
Did my
Man.
research, JQ. And by I mean I and Claude. But no, you wrote a paper about what we're seeing now, and I think you were about a decade, maybe even like 15 years too early. But your kind of thesis kind of came true in that models can now read pictures and PDFs, and they can listen to audio. Some of them can watch videos. Like that has kind of come to fruition. And I'm just curious, like, do you think multimodal is table stakes going forward?
Oh, 100%. Multimodal. And then Modal is a word that often we kind of think of it as just text, audio, video. But I think modal, even the meaning is going to change because it's going to be even things like using a computer is a modality. How do I click around a browser is a modality. Robotics, how do I control a machine to get things done for me? That's a modality too. And so when we think about modalities, I think it's going to be more like interaction surfaces. It's not so much audio or video. It's like what can an agent interact with? And that's modality for me right now. And so what's really exciting is seeing the AI systems not be locked in just text and images and video, but starting to get into the real world in some way, right? The real digital world when it's using a machine, using a browser, using a computer, understanding how to work with the APIs, write code for that. And I think we're starting to see the early versions of it in robotics too, when the models are now in robots, going around the home doing stuff for us. There's some very early companies doing that as well. So as we see that expand, then we start to be creative about that. And this is where you start to see people start to think about what if we start breaking out of this and going into what they call world models? What if the model has a sense of how the world operates? A modality in some ways. That is like now predicting not just the next token and text, it's predicting how the state of the world would be. How would others react if I did this? So we're seeing a lot of advances down that line, and it's getting really exciting, honestly.
Well, let's get into one of those
Yeah,
modalities that you mentioned, the API itself. And I didn't ever think of API as one of the modes that are rising to the top, but it kind of makes sense as API being that, and that is what Mint MCP kind of does. Is it kind of connects you to APIs, whether the API that you're using is set up to connect to AI tooling or not. So I'm curious of like how you came about that realization that the connection between APIs and the AI tooling is really one of the modes that is necessary to solve for.
100%. So the maybe this actually rolls back time to before Mint. We were working on a product called Lutra that I think Mikey you alluded to. We actually built up a whole agentic system with a harness, a sandbox, code mode, to calling, all of it. The entire system. This is pre-MCPs, and in that process of building that particular product, we just learned that two things in there. Like the models can do a lot if they can write code and software. Number one. Number two, they can reason about how to work with different systems. They could call APIs and talk to different systems. But number three is that the way you design a ideal system for the models to work with, the AI to work with, it needs to be changed a little bit. And here's what's different there, where the API documentations, APIs were designed for developers to work with. They have this doc, this specs. When they make an error, they say error, I don't know, 503, and then you read the book and see, okay, what happened there? The way it's designed is really like a manual for engineers. It's like CRUD based, create, update, delete type things. When you work with a model and AI system, to do a task, if a model has a reason through, okay, I need to call this 5 APIs in this specific sequence to get this thing done, it's actually kind of challenging. And sometimes it gets lost. It's like, which API did I call again? And you lose what you call reliability, right? And so what we learned in that process was that we need to rethink what an API layer is for a model. It needs to be designed not around the data systems, which is how we design APIs usually, like GraphQL and REST APIs are designed around the data model. Instead, for AI, we need to design the interface layer to be more around the use cases, right? So like, what is a user trying to do? What's the AI trying to do? And maybe here's to give you a very concrete example. We implemented a Slack server for our AI system to use a while back. And if you wanted to have the AI send Slack messages, it's easy, single post message call. If you wanted the AI to send Slack messages with an attachment, it gets tricky now. You got to call an API to provision a place to upload the file. You got to upload the file. Then you need to call the post message with the reference to the ID of the earlier thing that you provisioned. Instead, what you want to give the AI is a simpler interface, like, hey, post a message with this attachment, right? And behind the scenes, you do all the API calls, all of that. And so that kind of design or something that we're all coming to understand right now. And in the last year, this is probably where you heard of MCPs. And MCPs is saying that we need to redesign APIs for AI, and that's where that comes in. It's a model context protocol, right? And that's happy to dive more into details about that. But that's the evolution we saw.
Give me one sec. Ooh,
Yeah.
I got the leaf blower going.
No, I heard that too.
I'm like, what
Yes.
are you doing, blowing leaves? But yeah. So MCP is really the thing on everybody's mind right now, and also there's like this push and pull between is MCP the right call or CLI is the right call, and honestly, I kind of think they're both important for different reasons and different scenarios. But it seems like, and this is what we've seen at DNS Filter since we've been a Mint MCP customer, is that the MCP, it obscures a lot of the complexity. And this is what you were saying with that Slack
Exactly.
example. It obscures a lot of the complexity away from like salespeople, marketing people, HR, finance, so that you can give them a ton of power while keeping them safe and secure. Um, and getting them access to the data and the tooling that they need. And I'm just curious what you think about that CLI versus MCP kind of debate.
Now, lots of thoughts in there. In fact, I have a blog post on this that we should share later too.
Oh yeah, well,
But yeah, I'll send you the link. The thing in here that I think is really down to the use case and the user. So I use all three depending on what I'm doing. So let me explain that a bit. So when I'm hacking away, developing, and I'm experimenting, especially in my personal setup, I have a very extensive personal AI setup. I'm all in on API, CLIs, getting things done, shipping quickly. I know what I'm doing. I can see what the agent is doing. I know how to look at the CLI calls, API calls, and say this is the right things you should be doing. I get the machine to write scripts that I'm a bit more bounded in what it can do. Very flexible, very amazing, and I do the right things, right? If I see an API key in there, I rotate it. I make sure that there's all like, dev staging prod all done right. Now, if you take that and then when I switch to a more business oriented context, if I'm doing my CRM work or my team is working with me and like making agents go, we don't really want those agents to start using API keys directly. If my AE, my sales guy on my team is getting an agent to do something and it's making a direct API call to say Salesforce, it's going to be probably over provision. There's no way telling what the agent would do with the API key. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that this data isn't there. Maybe the database needs to clean up. Let me just clean it up for you. Let's clean it all up, right? So the problem with API keys and CLIs is that the permissioning system it's often like really hard to get a handle on. API keys often give you the keys to the kingdom. You can run anything you want. CLIs as well. And so when you start to get into a world where non-engineers, business users are getting into this, and the caution and control you have is just a bit less easy for them to understand, then you get into a world where MCPs become a nice control plane, right? Because MCPs they no longer have direct access to the APIs, but a very AI-oriented tool boundary, right? And in that tool boundary, you can start doing things like let me disable all deletes, let me have it be read only. Now, while the API key below that makes the actual API calls have the full permissioning, perhaps the layer to the agent, which is the MCP thing, is a much smaller surface area that only limits it to what you want the team to be able to do. So increasingly, as we go to enterprise business users and cloud core work and all of that, we have seen that MCPs are a better fit for that kind of end users. And if you're a hacker individual hacking away on your OpenClaw, you probably want to be in API CLI then. So depending on who you are, I think there's a place for both, and I use both all the time too. And then there's another one in skills, but we can get to that as well.
yeah. So that's
That's,
you were just
yes.
talking about the powerful move that I've seen with MCP gateways, and we went on this journey because of the same reason. Because I have people in HR or sales that need access to like our CRM or our the thing that manages like our staff database, and like I can't get them the API key, and I can't get them anyway. Like that, and that's great. I should not be able to get those API keys, and I cannot. So the cool thing about an MCP gateway layer, and for everybody listening, this is like a kind of an unlock that we found at DNS Filter through Mint MCP. They're a great option if you're on this journey. you can create those customizations that JQ was talking about. Like you can have a read-only API key for certain things and allow that for certain people. You can have other API keys that have a bit more power and can read and write or update or whatever, and those can be available for other people. And even within those, in the gateway platform, you can turn on and off specific tooling. So right now, we have per user OAuth connections to our CRM, which is great. Each person identifies as themselves, so they automatically get their permissions in that system. But currently, we have the destructive behaviors, right? Updating, deleting things, completely turned off, not available, because we're still in the learning phase of what this kind of world is all about and if they could do something destructive accidentally. So we're in this phase where we're just exploring those capabilities, trying to understand, is it okay to give them a little bit more power? And we'll cross those barriers when we feel comfortable with it. But this is a journey that you can get on, and I think that an MCP gateway is really a solution that everyone needs to at least research. And I'm sure you would agree.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, maybe take a step back about it. It's like the reason we even started doing this was that we wanted to have agents in our ecosystem. And we realized that the security boundaries and permissioning was the biggest problem. I wanted to have agents that would wake up at 5 a.m. in the day and start, categorizing my emails, start looking and pre-writing responses, start looking at the CRM, start saying, hey, Mikey is a customer of us. Is there anything new in DNS filters land? Let us know so we can ping him. I wanted to do all of that kind of stuff. But at the same time, I wanted to have, I wanted to sleep well. I don't want to wake up at 5 a.m. going worried about this, right? And so I wanted to also have like very strong statements I could make that this is what it can read, this is what it can write, this is what it cannot do. And over time, just open up a little bit more of the access. So for example, I have some agents that have a lot of read access, and they can only do two actions that are write, which is create a note in the CRM and draft an email. That's all they can do. So even if they get prompt injected, if they read something bad on the internet, the worst thing they could do is create many notes in the CRM, and I can just go delete them later. It's all fine, right?
Notes. It's like, yeah.
I know. So I mean, funny thing, I have one agent that I think I need to tune better because it's an agent that runs ambiently. It's like it tells me what to do, and I think I've noticed it sometimes at like 11 a.m. writing 10 draft emails saying that, hey, I don't think you responded to those guys enough. Here, I sent 10 draft emails ready to go. and I look through them like, oh, I don't think this is relevant. I delete all of them. But I'm not, I mean, this just shows that I'm not ready for them just send emails yet. I think it'll be, a bit of time before we get there. But then if we can start scoping them down, not just to read only, but stage actions, right? Actions that are not external facing, actions that are internal facing, actions that you have like confidence, even if something goes bad, you can undo quickly. You can start expanding the use cases. And it gets really interesting when you start to poke a little bit more and keep working on that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I'm going to not tell the full story, but anyway, I was on a support call with one of the, it was Bo from the Mint MCP team, and he was kind of accidentally showing me the chat setup that you guys have, how you communicate with your agents. And I was like, wait a minute, go back. Can you tell me what you guys are doing there? So y'all have like, I don't know, a couple dozen channels where you can communicate with those agents. And if they're working autonomously from other system triggers, they'll report back on like the status of something. So this is what happened. I was having trouble connecting a system to Mint MCP. And Bo was like, oh, he went into the channel, gave it documentation link, a URL for the thing I was trying to connect to. And the agent already knew everything there was to know about Mint MCP. And he basically said, write the documentation. And like 5 minutes later, we're talking. And then he goes, oh, here, your link's ready. And he sends me the link on your website with the new documentation, just sitting there waiting for me to do it. I was like, oh my gosh. Anyway, that was the day we became a customer for sure.
Amazing. No, that's a great story. But maybe So maybe I'll share a little bit about what we do. So people have context around that. So we are trying to be an extremely agentified organization, and Mint is actually one of the biggest users of Mint ourselves, customer zero, right? And so we run everything through agents in our business, where these things actually live in our chat systems, Team Slack, Forest Slack, and we chat with them. And the agents have long-term memory; they remember what they do. They run in like a harness. We use Claude Code for the harness. They can connect to external systems, but only through the gateway. So the way the agent runs is like it can't talk to anything else on the internet except the gateway, right? And so this becomes a very tight data choke point. So we can really observe what's going in and out of it, and then run it in a sandbox, right? So the sandbox wraps it up all nicely so that it can't do literally network calls to anything else. And so what's really nice about this is that we chat with it in Slack. Every message spins up a sandbox, runs Claude Code, connects to the MCP stuff, does all the work, replies in the thread, and then returns. The interesting thing for us was that after we set this up, it was incredibly democratizing. So, Mikey, you talk about that experience, right? But if you notice what Bo did there, anyone could do. You don't have to be an engineer now. If you have doing something and you would like a change to be effected in some part of the platform, you can ask a bot to create a pull request for that change. And then we have some engineers reviewing everything, making sure it's all right before they merge it in, of course. But anyone now can do that. So just a week ago, I was talking to a customer, different customer here. They're letting me know about a bug they found. Like, oh, there's this legacy issue. Can you please fix this? Okay, VS Code had some things that we had to patch, and now we can undo it because they caught up. And then they sent to me in the Slack message. I forwarded it to the bot to say, hey, bot, address this. That's all the message was. Hey, bot, address this. The bot spun up, ran the sandbox, started working through its things, spent like 10 minutes figuring it out, made a change, sent it to me, say, I'm done, please review. I clicked on it, reviewed it, looks good, merged it in, right? And so these really start to feel a bit more like, agent co-worker-ish type interfaces. And then that's just one example. We have bots that wake up after every sales call, analyzes the call, figures out the best practices, writes a note into the CRM. All it can do is create notes. Another bot wakes up, looks at all the notes, look at all the interfaces, maybe even creates custom reply sales materials, drafts a reply in Outlook or Gmail and say, ready to send, right? So it's just like piecing all of these guys together with their own instructions, their own MCPs, their own skills, their own memory. We start to see the emergence of this, agent ecosystem in a company. And we're up to about 20, close to 30 agents now. In fact, we're rolling out this week right now, which is there'll be an agent now sitting in all of our customers' Slack channels, where I think, Mikey, you could be able to play a bit later, ask it questions. And that experience you had with Bo, now you can do it. There's no need. Why we drive it? You can do it.
Yeah, I'm probably why he made that. He was like, yeah,
maybe
yes. So you're kind of in this AI native workspace, company that you're stewarding, and I think everyone else is like, how do we get there? So I'm curious of maybe just some advice, maybe more practical about your specific agents, or just generalities about agent construction that people should consider.
Yeah, no, happy to give advice there. It was like a 6-month journey for us to get here, and where you start is very, very different from where you end up. So a few things in there. I think for most people, I think where you want to start today is to get a system like Claude Cowork. And I think ChatGPT Enterprise has some new features around that too. So ChatGPT, some stuff. But Claude Cowork is probably where I'll just start by default, because something that I'm familiar with and did a lot. And it's a bit different from the chat systems, right? And what the main difference there is that this is now an agentic platform that can directly interact with the files on your computer. It can directly open a docx Excel file, a PowerPoint file. It can directly add a slide to your deck. It can add a column to your Excel file on your machine and put a formula in there. I'll start there, because then you start to understand how these systems are not just chatbots. They are workbots. They get work done for you, not on your machine. And once you get familiar with that, the next step is to then start connecting it to the MCP ecosystem. Now, what if you had a CRM, Salesforce, or HubSpot, and you wanted to get a Excel file of the accounts at risk. Wouldn't it be nice if you could just go to Claude Code and say, hey, make an Excel file, accounts at risk, populate the table in this ways, making a PowerPoint presentation, want to discuss this with my team later. You can do that today because once the MCP connectors are in place, they can pull the data live and Claude can start making those files on your machine for you right there. So that's step 2. Now, step 3 and 4 is going to be more advanced. Now, step 3 is once you've done that, the thing that you really want to think about carefully is how does Claude remember what to do each time? How does it know your company's setup? So many people might have heard of the terms Claude.md or agents.md. .md just means markdown. So these are markdown files that contain instructions for the model. And you want to start having Claude create these markdown files in the folders that they work in. Right. And then over there, you start putting instructions like, this is my business, this is who I am, this is what we do, here's how I think about things, da da da. And our brand design is this, our ICP is this, all the stuff that you care about your business should be in those files. Right. It's like describing who they are, what they do, a bit of a knowledge base. The Claude MD, Agents MD files. So what my suggestion there is actually that you shouldn't be writing these files by hand. Instead, as you get your work done and you give Claude feedback and it's getting your work done, every now and then say, please remember what we just did. We did this stuff. Can you write it down in your Claude MD file so the next time we do this, right? So that's like number 3. Now, and number 4, I'm just going to kind of long in here. Hopefully that's good. But number 4, I think, is this idea of skills now, right? So we've gone through different processes using this. Now, skills are essentially SOPs, standard operating procedures for an AI agent. Going back again to the sales CRM example, the way you think about, say, a qualified lead is going to be extremely different for your company versus anyone else. How you qualify, where you qualify your lead process, or like how you become an MQL, SQL down to a, potential like deal, all very different for everyone, right? Your gates and all. Claude doesn't know that. Claude is just like a very smart PhD level intelligence. So skills in Claude are basically, again, markdown files, big text blocks that describe the standard operating procedures for your company. This is how we do lead qualification. This is how we write. This is the tone of voice. This is how I do our front end design. This is how we do our back end design. When we do marketing, this is the process that we go through. So any process procedures, imagine you're onboarding, a new intern or new employee day one. You're walking through them through all the processes in your company. You kind of have to do that too for the AI. And for the AI, it just turns out that those things end up as skill MD files. So number 4 is that start to think about the collection of skill MD files that you want to imbue into the AI systems, build them up, and then share it with your team. Right now, everyone can now share the SOPs because it's a company-wide thing there. Then eventually, you probably also want to have skill files for your employees, like, a skill file to help an employee figure out how to use Claude. I heard of that recently. It's a really good skill. So it's like now you can even onboarding into AI can be done through that. It's a process, right? Nothing but a process. So anything that's an SOP, onboarding, all directions. So to think about that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so let us know in the comments where you're at on your journey with AI. If you're a IT practitioner or a managed service provider, DNS Filter, we're in the kind of, now that we have safely connected our tools to our AI, we are down the path of creating skills and plugins and kind of workflows with Claude Code Claude is what we use. To automate some tasks. And people are coming up every day and saying, I do this or I use this other tool. And I'm like, that tool can totally be replaced now that we have, our CRM and our transcription service for meetings in the same place. And you can just ask Claude to connect them together and give you that kind of recap of the meeting and all the details about the customer and their account. So that's just a skill or perhaps a plugin in the Claude ecosystem. It's once you connect the pieces, the onboarding that no one ever writes. No one's ever written their onboarding, and if they have, probably haven't done it well. But I guarantee you, with AI's help, you can actually write clever, well-documented procedures so that the AI will produce better results for you. And then just so happens those same procedures are well suited for other tasks like onboarding new employees, onboarding new agents. So it's like it's like an unlock basically when you get your tools connected to your AI and you feel comfortable about it, which means you can progress to the next step towards the Mint MCP AI native future that we're all going for.
Yeah, there's a few more steps after that, but we just read like a broad strokes what happens after that. So you start to think about things like memory. Because like now, like the agents understand your business, they are connected to your data, but they don't remember it yet. You talk to it today, you talk to it tomorrow, it's like still a fresh, almost like a fresh state of memory. So how should agents track their progress? How do they how can they pick up where they left off? How can they understand, who they are working with in the team? Those are the memory stuff that you start to get into next. And then after that, it's like you start to think of them as like, wait, it's still single player. Mikey, me, still working with Claude. It's like very single player. How do we get to multiplayer? How can a single agent now imbued with memory, skills, and MCPs be an entity that interacts with many people, not just one? Now, multiplayer, and then this is where you start to see them in Slack now, because that's the natural multiplayer place that we play in, the grounds there. Then after that, it's a thing about, wait, if they're multiplayer now, why aren't they multi-agent? How should they communicate with each other, and how do they orchestrate stuff? And the rabbit hole goes deeper and deeper from there. That's a exciting future that we're heading towards.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have this very intricate system of, like you were talking about, the
Yes.
Claude and agents files. So that's what I started with long ago, and now I have like a very complex folder, several folders actually now. If it deserves its own Git repo, it gets its own folder, and they know how to communicate between each other. But now I can kind of see how to translate that into like an agent atmosphere, where they each have their little context stack. But yeah, memory maxing is definitely a thing everyone is paying attention to. Do you have any strategies that you would recommend?
Yeah. So my strategy actually is the simple strategy there, and it works really well. So the strategy that I have is, Mikey already in on this, which is use Git as memory. Create a GitHub repository, not for the intention to code, but for the intention to be a big repository of markdown files that serve as the agent memory. And it turns out that Claude Code, all of these systems, they can work with very big code bases. They know how to manage like tens, hundred thousands of files and figure out what they need and make progress. If your memory system has 1,000 markdown files, it's like a piece of cake for them. They'll just grab through the files, figure out how to get there, and go from it. Now, Git is very interesting to me as a memory system because you get a lot of benefits from it. So for those who don't know, Git is the version control system many engineers use to write software in. But because it's a version control system, what that means is that you now have version memories. If your agent remembered something bad, or you're like, oh my god, it's doing something I don't like it to do, like, hey, just go back to yourself 3 days ago. It's like, okay, I'm reverting, right? The agent can revert itself back to any time point. As an audit log, you can see the exact commits into the memory. You can see who committed, when it committed, and when it got that memory. Guess what? It's a human in the loop. So if you use Git and GitHub, there's a concept called pull requests. And a pull request is basically when two engineers are collaborating. One makes a change, someone else reviews and says approves, then it gets merged into the system. Memories and an agent can go through pull requests if they're in Git. Agent proposes an update to its knowledge base in its MD files. Human can review that and approve it, then it gets merged in. So now we have human in the loop. Then beyond that, we have multi-agent. Pull request systems Git was designed for many humans to collaborate on a big code base independently, having all the conflicts, all the mergers, stepping on each other's toes and figuring out how to resolve them. When you have multiple agents working simultaneously in the same memory, you need that too. How do they reconcile their memories? What if they suddenly do analysis and find something different? Who's right? Stuff like that. Now, the Git platform just provides a way for them to manage through this. And the better thing is that you don't have to train the model to do this. The model already knows how to do Git merges. So because of that, it will do memory merges very seamlessly for you. So, big tip there, use Git as memory. And maybe the last tip, why this is important. When you do that, you own your memory. right? And this is critical because let's say today you're using Claude Code, and you're working with the system, and your memory is stored in Claude. It's kind of annoying to get it out and move it to Codex ChatGPT to try it there. But if your memory is stored as a bunch of files in a Git repo, you can literally switch between any AI system you want, and they all know how to work with it, right? So now you have sovereignty, you have ownership of the memory, which I think is really important moving forward as we experiment, learn more about AI, and try more things out.
Well, you guys are already kind of using agentic development for a lot of things. And I do this, but I do it more on a manual way. I suspect you guys are a little more automated. But I'm curious what can like managed service provider leaders and IT teams that are going to get a question like, hey, can Claude Code, run on the corporate code base, run on our app GitHub repo? And they get that from engineering. Like, what is like a realistic on ramp that isn't like a fire drill and takes 6 months to implement?
Yeah, that's a really good question there. I think a lot of it comes down to your security and governance posture. So one there is like, okay, if I'm using Claude, like, do I need it to be gapped in some way that's like there's some boundaries on what it can access. So we've seen customers of ours use Claude Code directly from Anthropic. They use it sometimes through Bedrock. So they're more in their an Amazon VPC type environment. So that's number one, is like figuring out your posture. And the good news is that there are many options to run these models in different scenarios now. Number two is that if you're there are two different levels on, I think, getting the models to code for you. The first level is actually, I mean, many levels. I'll just address first two. The first one is like, it's very easy today to actually install Claude Code and then install it into your GitHub application. My name is GitHub Enterprise and so on. And then Claude can start immediately working in there, making pull requests, looking at the code base. And it can do this just by looking at code, right? It doesn't actually have to run the code. You can just like look at the code, and if the instructions in there on how to run it, it can also try to run it in a test sandbox environment that's in there. We do that a lot. In a GitHub pull request, you can just type at Claude, make this happen, it'll respond, do things in there. The next step up, I think, from there is starting to get into the more integrated space. So if Claude is making code changes, can it not only just write the code but test it? Can it push to a place where it records what it did, screenshot it or something? So there's a bunch of different services, Claude, Cursor, they're all dabbling into this right now, and Devin as well from Connection, where you can give the agents a task, it will make the changes, it will try to run it, it will try to run a browser, it will try to take a video for you and say this is it. So I think to see that happen as well. Now, that I think is very nuanced in that depending on your company's setup and the engineering side, it may be easier or harder depending on it like multi-repo, single repo, and so on. Then I think the step, after that, I think is really trying to get to the point where these things start to look a little bit more like co-worker dev agents. And maybe like we are a little bit in that realm where we ask our dev bot, we call it Dan. Dan is do anything, and we call it Dan loop, do anything in the loop there. And so what we do these days for ourselves is we send messages to a Slack bot on like what to implement. The Slack bot spins up in the sandbox, things we talked about. It runs Claude to make a plan. Claude reviews the plan. Claude implements it. Then it runs Codex to review the implementation. Claude then looks at Codex's review and says, okay, was that good or bad? And then fixes it and ignores the nits because Codex is extremely nitpicky. And then Claude reviews, and then the models kind of review in a loop until they get to convergence. And then once they're done, then the human reviews it. And in part of that loop, one of the reviews is to simplify the code. So sometimes the code comes out simpler than what it first goes in, quite often. So then, as a human, we review lots of especially the infra security code the models produce. And so we review, but only after the models have churned on it for like half an hour, 45 minutes, 1 hour. That saves the human time significantly, right? So every team is different, kind of like figuring out how you do this and probably thinking hard about the review process. It's probably why the next frontier is where you probably have too much code produced now. How do you manage that?
So I have one question about the future and then a few rapid fire questions.
Go for it, yes.
First, about the future, I'm thinking of where MCP gateways are going, or MCPs in general are going. And I've seen like Claude, the desktop app, and other things seem to be very heavily reliant on MCPs, whereas the recent Codex release seems to be like taking a screenshot, reading the screenshot of your computer, and doing things kind of natively like a human would do with its eyesight, finger quotes. So I'm curious, where do you think MCPs lands? And then it kind of goes back to that MCP versus CLI. Like, what do you think the future of MCP holds?
So I actually think it's like USB in some way. That's how we came out. Now, when USB first came out, I'm not sure you remember the plugs. They're like this weird, rectangular type plugs, and then they became USB-Bs and micro plugs. And then USB-C is this thing that we all use now. MCPs are going to change. Like the umbrella term, I think, it's called Model Context Protocol. We need a protocol to figure out how things get into the model context and how things get out of the model context, right? So that's MCP. So how MCP would look and the form factor, what it would do, is going to change, just like yes, USB did. But the fact that we need to figure a way to plug in and out of the context window of the model will never change, right? So in my mind is that expect MCP 2.0 to look quite different. In fact, there's a working group today that's looking into how skills can become part of MCPs, and that's really exciting. And so that's going to change significantly too. Now, I think that is going to be designed a lot more about agents and AI use. And I wouldn't be surprised if one day you'll find that the point and click on the browser window is just another MCP. Right? So,
I mean, it basically is now. It's like the slowest API in the world.
Exactly. So think of it that way is how I would think about it. And then we need to design the security governance layer. So it's going to evolve very quickly. Then APIs are just not designed for this world. They're designed for developers to write code, and they will still be for that purpose. If you're writing software and delivering an iOS app or a web app, you probably do not want to use MCPs behind the scenes because it's not designed for your app to call. It's designed for AI to call, right? And if you're doing CLI stuff, it's just a developer. CLIs are really for developers. So increasingly, as we see the market evolve and non-engineers get to use the agents, I think MCPs will have a huge role to play in that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Now, some rapid fire questions. You ready? Codex or Claude code? And I'm not going to put any other variables in there. That's it. That's the question.
Claude code. Claude code. I pay Claude code like a few $100 a month, and Codex $20 a month. So I use both.
Okay. Based on my wallet, Claude.
Yes, based on wallet, Claude code. Yes.
All right. Out of I think you guys have like 30 agents or so. Which one earns its keep the most?
Oh, Max. Max is the first very early deal. Max's name's called Max because he's the deal maximizer.
Oh, the deal maximizer.
Has been around for months and scans the deals, make sure everything is going, nothing's falling through the cracks. We're following up, making sure sales happen. My God, without Max, I think things will be falling through the cracks. Max has been earning this keep. Yes.
Shout out to Max, closing deals. Good job, Max. It's like employee of the month, agent of the month. You gotta have an
agent
award.
of the month. Yeah.
All right. What is the most underrated MCP out in the wild right now?
Ooh, underrated MCP out in the wild.
And you can't say the Salesforce MCP from Mint MCP because that would be cheating. But just so you all know, it's awesome, and Salesforce doesn't offer one.
Yes.
Can
I give you a different answer that's very adjacent to that?
Sure.
So the underrated thing is to build your own MCP. So here's my story. Last week, I am doing some hiring stuff. We use this thing called Ashby for jobs and hiring. Many startups use that. No MCP, but a very extensive API. I was like, hey, Claude, look at this API docs. I need an MCP for this. I don't want to log in and click the buttons on Ashby. Too many buttons to click. Hey, Claude, look at the Mint documents. After you build it, deploy it there. Boom. In 20 minutes, I had coffee come back. It was ready to go. So I think the underrated thing in my mind is build your own. You can control your destiny. You can control the supply chain, the tool chain, all of it. And I think that's where the unlock really happens.
Yeah, totally. And just go ahead.
Oh, and I think the thing that to be realized that it's not hard to build because the models are so good at coding. And guess what? They actually have MCP builder skills. We have one too. And so it's ready to go. It's very easy.
So another little story. I'm looking at our Mint MCP dashboard. About 75% of the MCPs in there are custom that I
Whoa.
built with Claude because those companies did not offer an MCP, or they're custom in a way like they're remote. Perhaps some of them are just they make one, they host it. We're connecting to it through Mint MCP, so it's not full on wrote 75% of them, but there are some very obscure tooling that we use, like one for there's a thing called Vizard.ai that makes clips from videos like this one and does the captions and all that stuff. Has a great API, does not have an MCP. So I had Claude write an MCP for that, deployed it on Mint MCP. Same thing with other tooling that we have. Like there's a lot of obscure APIs that you would love to connect to through Claude, and it's super easy to do with the Mint MCP, the very meta. But anyway, it's a very good tool that you guys have. Plus Claude or Codex, whatever you happen to be running, you can make your own MCPs to connect to almost anything with an API.
Exactly. And I think that's the underrated thing, because it's like the world expands. It's like you're not limited to what's available, right? Not just what's open source or what's given to you. Like you can decide what you want your AI to work with now.
All right, now this one's going to hurt some people's feelings in your past. You ready? Stanford or Google Brain, which one shaped how you build more?
Ooh, I think
You can refuse.
It's
That's fine.
hard. I would say Stanford shaped me a lot. I met
Okay.
really, really smart people there. I met Andre Kapadi was in the same group as me. Hang out with Richard
Oh,
Socher,
okay.
Quakley, like really good people there, like amazing folks there. It shaped me a lot, and I think that's when I also had my first forays in my first startup experience. Because Coursera, for 6 months before the company was founded, was a Stanford project around online learning. So I saw the entire evolution there from that. Yeah.
Very cool. Sorry, Google Brain. All right, one AI hot take you defend in a room full of skeptics.
Oh boy, what are they skeptical about? I say, what's a hot take in there?
It's like no one's skeptical about AI
Yeah,
anymore.
I think the skeptics are gone. The skeptics are gone. No, but I would say that maybe I will do a self-reflection here. I was skeptical about how much better the models would have been a year ago. I was like, yeah, they're reaching their plateau, And then every 6 months, I go like, oh shoot, they have not reached their plateau. And then
Yes.
last end of last year, I was like, okay, we might be another 2 years out before full genetic stuff is going to work. Then Opus 4.5 came out, Opus 4.6. I was like, oh shoot,
Yep.
And then today, last night, I was doing some tasks with Claude. I set it on something pretty sophisticated. It ran for an hour and 57 minutes and then came back to me. So I'm like, when people say these things are working for hours at a time and getting things done for people, I was a skeptic of that myself a year ago, and I am no longer. And I think many people today are probably reading these articles out there and say, "Wait, these things can work for hours? Are you sure? What are they doing? Are they just mucking around and playing with it?" I'm like, no, they're doing real work, right? And I
Yeah.
think the scope and task that we're going to see them do is just going to expand. And yeah, so I guess maybe I skeptic on my own self, and I would like, yeah, I actually have less priors now on the limits, and yeah, and I think I encourage people to try it out. Like really just push the boundaries and see what they can do.
Well, that is a good note to end on. JQ, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thank you, Mikey. It was a pleasure to be on the podcast.
And where can people find you on the interwebs if they want to reach out?
LinkedIn is the best place. So I'm most active on LinkedIn. So my name is pretty unique. Find me on LinkedIn. J Ngiam is another the handle there. And I look forward to connecting. Please connect with me, send me messages. Happy to answer any questions anyone has about MCPs and the whole agent ecosystem.